Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Bennick. I'm with the Newman Numismatic Portal, and this is yet another in a series of interviews with numismatists from a wide range of backgrounds. And today I'm with Ron Gillio, and we're going to be talking about his career, his background, and how he got his start in numismatics. And I'm really excited for this conversation. Ron, hi, how are you today?
Greg, I'm fine. This is a great opportunity to tell my story, and thanks for contacting me. And I'm very excited about doing this with you.
I'm so glad. And for viewers, Ron has been very patient. We actually set this up 2 weeks ago, and just as we started the interview, my laptop died. And when I say died, I don't mean that the battery went out. I mean like into Apple for serious repairs and the whole 9 yards. So Ron has been most patient and most gracious. And Ron, I really appreciate that. Thank you so
Sure,
much.
Greg,
So
no problem.
great. Well, tell me just how did you get your start in the hobby? What got you interested in coins?
Well, it goes back to 1959. 1959, I was at a movie theater in line. I bought my ticket and I got change. And when I looked at my change, there was some really shiny pennies in my change. And I had been looking at coins. I was always interested in kind of looking at coins, and I noticed that it was different from some of the other older pennies that were in the same change I got. Of course, it was the new Lincoln Memorial penny, and I was very curious about it. I lived at the time in the San Fernando Valley in Sherman Oaks, California, and there was a coin dealer I found just around the corner almost from the theater, uh, Bert Doling, and who was kind of my mentor, that I went and talked to him, and he said, yes, it's a new penny. You should buy some of these and keep them. So I bought two rolls of 1959 Philadelphia pennies. He said, you can get the Denvers at the bank, but these are, better to get the Philadelphias. And that's what kind of got me started. And what got me really started, he told me, he said, if you're interested in older coins, you should go to the bank and get rolls of pennies. You can go through them and find older coins like in the teens. He said, if you find pennies with the San Francisco mint mark, the S mint mark, 1909 to 1915, the minimum he would pay me is 25 cents a piece. And, kid at 14 years old thinking, well, that's a great deal. So that's what got me started.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. Now, okay, so you get started buying two rolls of pennies. You are immediately business minded in terms of your approach to the hobby. How did that develop from there? Some people start with pennies and they're just putting pennies in albums forever, but you immediately got an offer to make a profit on selling these coins. So, how did that develop from there early on?
Well, what I did is I bought a Blue Whitman album, and he actually gave me one. He said, try to fill this. And I tried to fill that at the same time, finding the extra, selling to him. And I had to buy some from him that I couldn't find. And I continued collecting pennies in 1959, 1960, and I inherited some money from my grandfather in Rochester, New York, where I was from. Uh, and yeah, it was $2,000, and that was a lot of money to me at that time. So what I did is I bought some 1960 pennies from Bert, and I ordered some 1960 proof sets. The proof sets were $2.10 at the time, and I was very fortunate because they turned out to be small dates. So then I learned something new, that here there's a variety. And I took the rolls I bought from Bird for $1.50 back, and he gave me $150 a roll for them. And so that got me more interested as a more than just a collector, that this is something that maybe I can do and make money on. So I started very young, thinking I could buy and sell coins. The next thing I got into, when I had a little bit more money going in 1961, 1962, I started collecting 2 cent nickels and 3 cent nickels. And I had old Wait Raymond holders that I put the coins in, and I was buying them. And in those days, you could buy uncirculated 2 cent pieces or 3 cent pieces for $10 to $15 a piece. So I tried to get real nice ones, and so that kind of got me started. And the next kind of series is 1961, 1962, and the 2-cent pieces and 3-cent pieces.
That is so cool that you already were seeing a progression. Now, given that you were business minded and making transactions and making some money off of this, did you advertise? Did you go into business? What happened next?
Well, in when 1961 was the first coin show I went to. It was at the Statler Hill Hotel in Los Angeles. It was the Southern California Numismatic Association. It was the biggest shows before the Long Beach show or any shows in California. And everybody went to it. I mean, Abe Kossoff and Jerry Cohen and, you can name it, Herb Tobias, Lester Merkin, they all went there. And one person that I met in 1963 attending that show was Robert Johnson from San Francisco. And he had this fantastic tray in his showcase, a metal tray with $20, $10, $5, and $2.50 gold pieces in the tray. And I thought that was just fantastic. So I thought maybe I should buy some gold coins. And I had a little bit of money. And so I talked to him, got to know him, and he says, just buy one of each, one Liberty and one St. Guns. And I don't remember exactly what they were, but I remember giving them $100 and getting change back. They were 40 some odd dollars a piece. So that kind of started my career in $20 gold pieces. And then I started advertising in the Numismatic Scrapbook magazine, Numismatist, in about the same period of time, early 60s. And then I got into California fractional gold and just kind of went on from there. So I got interested in many different facets of the business and the collecting.
Now, I'm just curious because I'm trying to do the math with inflation and all. At the time, you buy one of each and you get change from a $100 bill. Now, granted, these coins were certainly cheaper, but was that a considerable amount of money at the time? Meaning, as you spent your $95 on these gold coins, that's the equivalent certainly of hundreds and hundreds of dollars today, but not as much as those coins would cost today. So you're still putting out quite a bit of money, even though they're much cheaper than they were today. That must have been pretty exhilarating and exciting, I would think, right?
Oh, it was. I mean, because at the same time, when the $20 gold piece was around $50, like I said, you could buy a 2-cent piece or 3-cent nickel and circulated $15. And of course, they've gone up a lot in value also. But at that same time, I also worked. I worked in a market. I was going to high school. And I was working in a market as what they call a bag boy, just bagging groceries for people. And I can remember at that time, a loaf of bread was about 25 cents, and a quart of milk was about 25 cents. So you can get kind of perspective here. A $20 gold piece now is around $2,000 here in 2023, and a loaf of bread or gasoline is around $4 or $5. So it was a lot of money at that
Yes,
time.
for sure. Now, when did you open your first shop? Did you open a first shop around that time? I mean, how old were you at this point?
Well, and I was 1963, 64. I was 17, 18 years old. I just advertised in the scrapbook and the numismatist at the time. Didn't really have a shop. When I graduated from high school, I opened a shop in Van Nuys, California. I opened the shop in 1966, so it was 2 years after I was after I graduated from high school. The thing that I did get involved in 1967, I got involved in the silver certificates.
Oh,
And
tell me more about that. Yeah, I'd like to hear about that.
yeah, well, at the time I opened the office, but I still worked. I worked at General Motors assembly plant. My uncles worked there, my father worked there, so I had a job there, and I was buying silver certificates during the day, working at night at General Motors. And then I had this job where I got a promotion and I had an offline job, so I had extra time. So I decided that I would tell the guys at work that I was buying these silver certificates. So during my work time, I would buy silver certificates from them, and I would buy them during the day from coin dealers. And then I would take a couple of days off and go up to the San Francisco Mint and cash them in for the silver, and then sell silver to a guy that was a coin dealer in San Francisco, Little Mint of San Francisco, Wayne Pertali, great guy. He's retired now, living in Mexico. But that was a great experience buying the silver certificates and cashing them in. So I did that at the same time, but I was making more money in a week than I was making in 6 months working. So I told my father I was going to quit. He didn't want me to quit, but I convinced him that I'm going to do it anyways. And I quit my job and I just went full time into the coin business at that time, and then going to coin shows and just kept going.
That's now at this point, was this around the time or just before you opened Western Coin and Antiques? Was that around the same time?
No, it's not. What happened was, is to give you a little bit more of what I did in '60s. I was still in the San Fernando Van Nuys. I had the office there. I was going to coin shows. I actually ran a little coin show and an auction with a coin dealer at the time named Paul Copenhaver. He he and I had an auction company. We ran auctions 1967, 68 in the San Fernando Valley. And then I decided that I wanted to move out of the LA area. So I used to go to Santa Barbara a lot in the 60s. So 1970, I moved to Santa Barbara and opened a store in Santa Barbara. At the same time, kept the office in Van Nuys. Oh, and what I haven't mentioned yet, there's so many little things that I did during that time. I also formed this American Institute of Professional Numismatists. I hired Walter Breen to write a book, How Coins Are Made and Mismade. And I had an office in Beverly Hills for the Institute, which was just a mailbox. It was not a mailbox. It was a building. It was 435 North Roxbury in Beverly Hills, where I'd go pick up my orders for the book that Walter wrote. And at the end of the course, the book, we would have a test, and I would actually give people the diplomas.
So
And
the book was like a workbook of sorts, like it was a workbook or a course of some kind.
it was a course on how coins were made and mismade. At the same time, I ran that. I closed my office in Van Nuys, opened the store Western Coin Antiques in 1970 in Santa Barbara.
So what was it like working with Walter Breen on this project? I mean, Breen at the time was already quite well known. So I mean, that must have been a pretty exciting time to work with him on that book. I've not seen a copy of that. I wonder if there are any existing in the world somewhere.
There's been a couple of, I mean, I still have a couple of copies, but they're still around. They come up every once in a while. Somebody will send me a picture of this book. We found this book. Do you remember doing it? And tell us a little bit more about it. Actually, the Asylum, they had an inquiry about it, so I did a little blurb on it for them one time. And it was fun working with Walter. That was my first experience with Walter in the 1970s. We did things later together, like the California Fractional Gold Book, but he was very interesting. At that time, Walter, he was the main figure at a coin show, writing letters to people, authenticating and their coins and writing them a letter. And at the time, there was no grading services or certification services, so he was kind of it. So he was an interesting character, to say the least. And at that same period of time, from 63 to 71 and continuing on, I went to San Francisco a lot, so I had occasions to visit Walter in Berkeley, where he lived. And it was he was quite interesting of a character. Then we did the California Fractional Gold Book in 1983. So
As I understood it, he had a photographic memory for coins, like literally remembered every coin he saw, as the legend goes.
oh yeah, he was amazing. He could remember everything, every little detail.
Wow. Now, how many people do you think passed the course and got your diploma? I need to go find some of these graduates someday and ask them how
I
rigorous the
would
course was.
say How many people passed the course? I would say that there was at least 1,000 people.
Wow.
Yeah, I
That's
mean the course was $10. I mean it was I'd go to the Beverly Hills. I live in the San Fernando Valley. I'd go to Beverly Hills, go there, get the checks, put them in the mail, send out the catalog. Some people would correspond with me, and then when they sent in the test in the back, Walter had an answer. He had we used his answers naturally. So there was a lot of people who didn't pass the test, but many did. I would say close to 1,000.
amazing. It's almost like your own college, essentially.
Yeah, it was. It was interesting. It's
Very much
just
so.
one of the things I did in my career.
I like it. So you mentioned Western coins and antiques. I know I brought it up slightly out of sequence before. What could you tell us about Western coin and antiques?
Well, I had been going to Santa Barbara for about 10 years before I opened up in 1971 there, the store, Western Coin Antiques. And it was just a regular coin store. I mean, it was a regular uh, coin store. I dealt in all facets of coins, coin supplies for collectors, and then that was kind of the beginning of people investing in coins, and especially in silver. So I dealt in that. And Santa Barbara is a small town, but an old town, so there's a lot of collections that would come in my store. And I still traveled. I would go to coin shows almost every other week. And on Wednesdays, I would go to Coinorama City in Hawthorne, California, which was a meeting place in the 60s and the 70s. So it was an interesting business, and I had some interesting clients, and it developed into a good business. And I still have the store in Santa Barbara.
Now, tell me this, the connection with antiques, since you haven't brought up antiques before. Western coin certainly makes sense. Tell me about your connection to antiques and what was the association there?
Well, most of the antiques I dealt in were Western paintings. I dealt in Tiffany lamps, Oriental and Persian rugs, and California paintings. But I did it more because I liked it. And I'm talking from my house, and my whole house is like a museum. Everybody says every time they come over, because I like paintings, and I like collecting things. I'm still a big collector of all kinds of things. But I
What,
didn't really deal that much in antiques, a little bit.
what sort of things do you love to collect? Meaning, if we were in your house right now, what would we predominantly see in terms of your favorite collections of your favorite items? What are the things that you love to collect the most, say?
Well, I collect European medals with ships on it, and historical U.S. medals, gold medals. I like all kinds of medals with different designs on them. Nothing. I don't have anything really rare, but I like medallions, and I like Tiffany lamps. I have some Tiffany lamps, and I have California paintings. I have a lot of Western art. So just a little bit of everything, really.
Great. Now, so Western Coin and Antiques is running. People are coming in, buying, selling coins, buying, selling these specific types of antiques. Now, throughout your career, and I might have been around this time or shortly thereafter, buying overseas became a huge part of what you do. So, as I understand it, you went to Switzerland first, or was it just a general trip to Europe first? How did it come about that you started integrating, going to Europe, finding coins, buying coins, and I'm assuming bringing them back to the United States and selling them? But please enlighten us and let us know the story about going to Europe, or if I'm right, Switzerland the first time to buy coins.
Okay, so yes, that's been a big part of my business. It still is, buying coins in Europe. At this present time, for the last 16 years, I'm a consultant for Stack's Bowers, and I do it for them. And it's been working out very well. And but to get started, it was actually Bob Johnson in San Francisco that kind of introduced me to the European market, because I was buying these 20. We talked about the 220s I bought from, but through the 60s, I continued to buy and sell $20 gold pieces, buying mostly from him. And another person I bought a lot of coins from was F.J. Vollmer, somewheres in the Midwest, Minnesota or someplace. But those the two people I was buying from, and I was selling them to different people in California, mostly, not too much out of the state of California. Um, I didn't have that much money, so I had to turn them quickly. But then he told me that he was buying most of them from a couple of sources in Europe, and that's where the coins were. So I started researching and found out how all the $20 gold pieces got to Europe during the 1930s when Roosevelt took us off the gold standard. So in 1970, I made my first trip. You're correct. My first trip was to Switzerland, was to Zurich, Switzerland, and that was either 1970 or 1971. And I had just so much money to spend, and I don't remember what I had to spend, but it lasted about an hour because there were so many coins there. So one thing in later years, Bob Johnson would finance me, and we'd go together. And he once told me, and this is so true, and I remember till today, that you'll never buy all the coins in Switzerland or in Europe. There's more coins than there is money, and he was so right because we're still buying coins. Not as many as we used to do, but there's still coins there. But that was kind of my experience. Started in 1970 buying coins in Switzerland, but then it really prompted me. I went on that trip, came home, sold the coins, and then one day a doctor walks in my store in Santa Barbara and says he wants to buy some $20 gold pieces. Heard I had $20 gold pieces from another customer of mine in Santa Barbara. And I showed him some $20 gold pieces, and they were at the time around $100 a piece, a little under $100 a piece. And he said, "Okay." He said, "How many of these you have?" And I had I think 20 at the time. He bought the 20, and he said he wanted to buy 100 of them. And at the time, I was buying a lot of coins at that time from a guy named Harry Gordon, who was another guy that went to Europe a lot. He was my senior. He was about the age of Bob Johnson at the time. And so I bought the 100 from him, and the doctor took those, and then when he picked those up, he said he wanted to buy 1,000. And I said, "Geez, 1,000." And I called Harry Gordon, and he got them for me, and he delivered them. He delivered them in the Swiss wrappers. So I told myself, well, he's just getting them out of Switzerland. I got to go to Switzerland more. So that kind of developed my trip to go to Switzerland. Plus, then I started going to London and other countries, buying other than just $20 gold pieces. I would go to London mostly. I was also, the thing we haven't touched on, I collected Vermont colonials, is a thing I collected after 2-cent pieces and 3-cent nickels. And actually, I would find a lot of colonial coins in London in the 70s.
Wow.
So that's the beginning of my European trips, which are still continuing now.
So why do you think it is that there were so many Vermont and colonials in London at the time?
Well, it wasn't just Vermont colonials. There was Vermont's, Connecticut's. I mean, a Continental Dollar I bought one time in London. They just seem to have ended up there over the years. People traveling to the Americas during that period of time when colonial coins were issued, or not even after they were issued. And this people would be going there in the 1780s, 1790s, and I believe in the early 1800s, and picking up odd things from America, and they just would bring them back, and they just ended up there.
But the gold coins were different though, because you were mentioning the gold standard. Could you tell us a little bit, just historically, when the gold standard came around, why there was this flood out of the country, just in case people haven't heard of that experience?
Well, I mean, there was a flood out of the country, people taking them out of the country, taking them to Europe, taking them to Canada, but also the payments on different debts at that time. The governments would take coin, not gold bars. They would take U.S. coin as payment in debt, and also big companies would have contracts. They get payment in $20 or US gold coins, and a lot of it was US gold coins. And the thing is that they kept them there. They didn't do like the Fort Knox did here, melt the coins. They ended up staying in the vaults in Europe, and that's for payment. There was just millions of coins sent over there in the 30s and the 40s.
And did you find that there were just far less coins to buy here in the US, or were the prices at which you could buy those coins far better in Europe, or both maybe?
There's far more coins in Europe and a better deal. I mean, I can remember my first trips to Switzerland. The main street in Zurich is called the Bahnhofstrasse, and on the Bahnhofstrasse at the time, which is not current anymore, the banks don't deal in coins in Switzerland anymore to any extent. But during the 70s and 80s, you could go down, you could start at one end of the Bahnhofstrasse and go to one bank, and they would have a chart. They would have half eagles, eagles, double eagles, sovereigns, Swiss 20 francs, and they would have the buy sell price. And you could just ask them for double eagles, and they would just dump out double eagles, and they wouldn't be sorted. There would be St. Gans and Liberties mixed. There would be dates in there. You could find CC20s. It was a gold mine, you might say. So you used to go from one bank to another and buy coins. Like I said earlier, I'd always run out of money, even when I had money from Bob Johnson. We'd go together. We'd always run out of money, but the coins are much cheaper over there and more available, and bring them back to the United States and sell them.
Incredible. So, and these days, obviously, quite long gone. But is there still a market to do this sort of thing? To go to Europe and look for American coins to bring home to sell? Are there still people doing that? And perhaps you're still doing that, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I'm still doing it, but not to that extent during that time, or the quantities. There's still coins there. It's more, PC just opened up an office in Paris, so they're grading coins. So what I get offered now, and what people have mostly, are graded coins, just like here. They're still there, but not like they used to be.
I love the idea of you going to Switzerland, having somebody dump out a bag of $20 gold pieces, and you running out of money in 1 hour. That's pretty fun. Pretty, it's pretty fun.
Yeah, that was. Of course, I can tell the same stories about going to coin shows, buying and selling coins, and running out of money, and figuring out that I had to sell some coins before I could buy more, or else I couldn't make my checks good.
I think anyone who's passionate about collecting has had the same experience, where I know that I've walked into coin shows in the past and been very excited to be at the coin show, and within 5 minutes I've expended the entire amount of money that I brought to the show, and start thinking to myself, okay, now what can I do? Where can I move? What can I do in order to keep this going? So it sounds like you've successfully done that, though, for the last it's seeming 50 years of buying, selling, and trading. So you must be doing something right.
Yeah, it'll be 60 years. My first ANA convention was Cleveland in 1964. So this year, coming up in Chicago, I'll get my 60-year pin. I've been to every ANA for 60 years, except for the one during COVID. So this was my 59th. I just attended in Pittsburgh.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I know that there was definitely some fanfare around you. We'll get to that in a little bit about your experience in Pittsburgh and winning awards and whatnot. But I'll be in Chicago. I'll look forward to you receiving your 60th. That's really exciting. In terms of those ANA conventions over the years, are there ones that you remember in particular, or people that you remember in particular? You mentioned Abe Kossoff earlier, and he was supposedly, this great dresser and looked really flashy and that sort of thing. I don't know if that's your recollection of him, but are there either him or others that you remember that stand out to you as people who were standouts in your memory?
Well, Abe Kossoff is a big standout in my memory, because he was obviously in when I first started, he was in Encino, California, and then he moved to Palm Springs. And I used to go and visit him and do business with him and buy coins from him. Not so much in the 70s. I really didn't start buying coins from him until the 1980s. But through the 80s and 90s, I did business with him. And he was a sharp dresser. He was very diplomatic, very always just perfectly dressed, and he was very fair. He always treated me very well, as most of those dealers during that time did. But he was close, so I could readily, go see him and buy a few coins. And then he started giving me coins on consignment to sell for him, which was good. So I did that, and I'll never forget the time that he called me one time. This is, I believe, could have been the 80s or maybe early 90s. He called me and said he's got something he wants to sell me. He wanted me to come to Palm Springs. And what it was, he was very friendly with and partners with Saul Kaplan, who was another dealer at that time. And Saul had passed away, and he said, I'm handing Saul's estate, and I got the balance left. He says, I want to sell it to you. And I'll never forget it, because it was safety deposit boxes full of coins and paper money. And so I asked him what he wanted for it. He said, you figure out a price. So I figured out a price. I'll never forget the price, because I ended up buying for it $126,000. Well, I didn't have $126,000 at the time. I mean, I had money, but it was all tied up. So I said, I can buy it from you, Abe. I can give you 10,000 and pay you the rest later. He says, fine. He says, pay me when you can. I'll never forget that. I had that same relationship with several dealers, that Bob Johnson, Sam Capel in Los Angeles. These are people that were icons in the industry at the time, and they always treated me very fairly, always willing to loan me money or sell me coins, pay me later. And of course, I always paid them, so they kept selling to me. But Abe was a fantastic gentleman.
I really like hearing that. And I actually have a couple people in the industry who have sold me coins. One in particular that I remember just last year sold me a quite expensive counter stamp coin. And I couldn't possibly pay for it at the time. And he wrote on the invoice, no dying allowed, meaning I'm not allowed to die until I pay him. Once I pay him, I can do whatever I want, but I can pay him whenever I can, but no dying allowed. Not allowed to die before I pay the invoice for this coin. So I'm half looking forward to paying it off, but I also don't want to pay it off because I don't want to start dying. But it's always good to have people like that in the industry who are willing to support you, and it sounds like you had that support from some icons in the industry as well.
Yeah, no, and just going back to the silver certificate days, Sam Coppell in Los Angeles, one of the dealers that I was buying silver certificates from, and one time I couldn't pay him. Not only I'll never forget, because not only he said, you can pay me later. He says, let me give you a couple $1,000 working capital more, so you have more money to work with. He said, but I want interest, and he charged me some kind of interest. So no, I had a big support. And another one was Lester Merkin in New York, who really helped me out, who was introduced to me by Bob Johnson on one of our trips to New York. And Lester was another gentleman. And
Now, Lester was doing quite a few auctions. I know that I own quite a few of his auction catalogs. I know he was doing auctions constantly. You were doing auctions as well, either at the time or shortly thereafter. Isn't that right?
well, like I said, in 1967, 68, I was in the auction business with Paul Copenhaver. I had auctions in Van Nuys. Then I started having my own auctions at the Long Beach Coin Show in the 90s, maybe late 80s.
Okay, so it was a bit later, but still.
Yeah, Long Beach Coin Show and different coin shows, I would have auctions. Yeah, they started about 1983, because I had a certified coin auction when PCS started in 1986. And then I also started having auctions in Hong Kong, and I started running shows in Hong Kong in the 1980s. So I had auctions in Hong Kong, Japan, and the US. I had a total of about 80 some odd auctions all through my career.
Now, the auctions that you were doing in Hong Kong and Japan, because we focused our conversation so far on Switzerland, how did you make it over to Hong Kong and Japan? And were you buying and selling Chinese coins and Japanese coins, or were you selling US coins in Hong Kong and US coins in Japan?
In Japan, it was an interesting question you asked, because one of the coins that's really popular in Japan is a $10 Indian gold coin. It was used for jewelry. This is in the 1990s now, maybe late 1980s. But I would go to Switzerland, buy rolls of $10 Indians, 50 coins to a roll, fly directly from Zurich to Tokyo and sell them there. And that kind of got me interested in also Asian coins. So I started dealing in Japanese coins. I'd find Japanese coins in Europe, and then I bring them to Japan and sell them. Same thing, the Chinese coins. I got interested in the Chinese coins, so I started buying the Chinese coins in the United States along with the Japanese coins, and then selling them in Japan and Hong Kong, and then not buying. I never really bought too much U.S. coins in the Asia. I did buy some, but not very many.
Were people in Hong Kong and Japan, were they interested in slabbed coins as that took off, or were they more interested in raw coins, like you mentioned for jewelry?
Well, during the time I was doing it, there was raw coins. I mean, I did go to Japan. I did take David Hall to Japan on a trip. We went to a coin show together and helped him promote PC Just. This was in 88, 89. And they started getting interested in the slab coins then, which they are now. But during this time when I went over there, there was really no slabs yet.
Hmm.
It didn't really kick in until the 90s. So most of my auctions were raw coins, and I'd get quite a few consignments from people in Hong Kong at the time for Chinese coins in my auction.
Hmm.
But yeah, that was my extent of the auction business. And then I had auctions in San Francisco with Bob Johnson and Butterfield's Auction Gallery. And like I said earlier, now I'm with Stack's Bowers, getting consignments for Stack's Bowers auctions.
Now, you mentioned the Long Beach show. When did you first start going to the Long Beach show?
Long Beach show started in 63 or 64. I started going in around that same time, around the first or the second show. It's interesting. I don't know if many people know how the Long Beach Coin Show got started, but I'll tell you the story.
Please do.
So the big show, as I said earlier, was the Southern California Numismatic Association at the Statler Hill in Los Angeles. It was a big show. And there was two coin dealers that got kicked out of the show. It was Ray Lundgren from Century Stamp and Coin in Los Angeles and Sam Fredakis from he had a coin shop in Long Beach, California. They got kicked out of the show for some reason. I don't know why. They wouldn't let them have a table. So Sam, Trader Sam and Ray Lundgren just decided to have their own show, and they opened the show in Long Beach. So that's what got Long Beach started. I think it's 1964. And so they started the show in Long Beach. And so I attended the Long Beach Coin Show every year since the 60s. And then I bought it from the owners at the time, which was Sam Lepresto in 1992. And then I ran it from 1992 to 2005, and then I sold it to David Hall at PCGS, and PCGS still owns it.
What was it like running the Long Beach show? I mean, you must have been the focus of a lot of attention, but also probably had to put out a ton of energy and coordinate so many different people. And just what are your memories of that?
Well, since I had the experience of running the coin show in the past and running auctions, I mean, I had a grasp of how to do it. And it was just, like you said, it was just coordinating people. I had a good staff of people working for me and organizing the show, and you'd hire a decorator. And the biggest challenge was dealing with all the dealers, that want everything a certain way, which is okay. So it was an interesting experience. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed running the show. And I mean, at the same time of running the show, I still attended the show and bought and sold coins.
Now, as I understand it, and I might be completely off base here, I understand that the early Long Beach days were quote unquote wild. meaning people described that the feeling of the show was more energetic. There was crazy things happening. The impression I got from talking to some people, and again, I might be totally off base and just hearing the impression of one or two wild party goers, was that it was almost like just like this like wild scene at the Long Beach show. Is that true, or can we put that rumor to rest and it was just an amazing coin show that just happened to be a lot of fun?
Well, the coin show was always very exciting, very energetic. There was a lot of things going on around the coin show, like poker games and wild parties. I would imagine. I mean, I sort of remember some myself, but it was very. Things were different then because we didn't have the internet during the major of the time that I went to the Long Beach show. So it was exciting to see what you could find at the show, and a lot of dealers would come just to sell at the show, and a lot of dealers would come just to buy as they do today. And it was very, very exciting. It was very exciting.
Sounds great. Now, what's overall, even Long Beach aside, what has been your favorite show to attend over the years?
Favorite show? Well, I mean, I think the most interesting show and my favorite show is the American Numismatic Association shows, because that's even like it just recently in Pittsburgh. It's a show you go to, you see some people, you only see them there. And that's the only show that they go to, whether they be collectors or dealers. And it's a who's who of people, numismatists and collectors and important people in our industry. And there's a lot of great educational talks. I always take time out to go see the exhibits. And so I would say my favorite is the A&A shows, although I like going to the shows, and I still go to shows in Europe, which are a little bit different than the shows here, even the way they display their merchandise. So those are always fun to go to too, and I still attend some of those.
How do they display their merchandise differently?
Well, today, like the last European show I was at was in Monaco, and you go to the show and there's some standard tables that have the showcases and the coins in the showcase, but traditionally, and there's still a majority of the dealers lay their coins out on little trays. No, not in showcases. They lay them on little trays where you can actually pick up the coins and look at them, or even the slabs. They're not in cases, and they just display things different. Is what they do.
Interesting. It's interesting you mentioned that, because I know that Morton and Eden has an auction of quite exquisite ancient Greek coins coming up. And when I saw them recently, they had their coins just in trays, and they were happy to show me coins that were well beyond what I would be purchasing. But they absolutely pulled them out, said, "Here, check it out, play with the coins, look at them, feel free to consider bidding on them." And it was a really different experience than just seeing trays of slabbed coins, of course, in cases.
Right, and like I say, they're not even at the European shows where I saw Martinita at the show in Pittsburgh too, where they're laid out on the table, not even in cases. So it's just another way of doing business, and the same thing with especially the European auctions in London, where as you're bidding on the coins, they're taking the coins around. There's like a horseshoe. The auctioneer's the podium, and there's a horseshoe you can sit at, tables, and as the lots come up, they take them around. I don't think they do it too much anymore, but that used to be the system in London.
Pretty interesting. I like that. Now, tell me, you mentioned earlier working for a couple times working for Stax Bowers. Can you tell me how you got connected to Stax Bowers and what that experience has been like?
Well, Stax Bowers, I mean, what happened was as I mentioned earlier, also, I sold the Long Beach Coin Show to David Hall in 2005. At the same period of time, I was doing a lot of business with Greg Roberts, who's the CEO of Stax Bowers and who started the Spectrum Group, which is still part of Stax Bowers. And I've been friends with him for 35 years, and we were doing a lot of business. And he just said to me, "So you sold the Long Beach Coin Show. You got time on your hands. Why don't you become a consultant for us?" And you can do what you do, go to Europe, buy and sell coins, and you'll just be doing it for Stax Bowers, so on and so forth. And so that was 16 years ago now. It all started by he wanted to maybe get something started in the Orient. So we planned a trip. He hired me, I think, in March, and there was the Tokyo International Coin Shows every May time period. So that was my first venture out. We got a table at the Tokyo show, and he went there with a couple of other employees and myself from Stax Bowers, and got things rolling.
Fantastic. And I'm assuming you worked and were connected to Dave Bowers as well. I was just curious what it was like to work with Dave. I've had very, very little interaction with him over the years, so I'm just always curious to ask.
Oh yeah, well, naturally I worked with Dave before my time with Stax Bowers, but during the Stax Bowers time, uh, I've worked with Dave. Of course, we're on two different sides of the United States. But he was very instrumental. Dave Bowers was very instrumental in my second edition. This is just before I joined Stax Bowers. Second edition of my California Fractional Gold book. Get me to do that. In I think it was like 2002, 2003. So he was very helpful with that and many other things that I've done in my career. But I didn't really work hand in hand with him because I'm in California and he's in New Hampshire.
Now, you mentioned the fractional gold book a couple times, and I completely would have forgotten to ask you about it. Tell us more about the fractional gold book. I think that's important as well, obviously.
Yeah, it's important. Actually, I will say that we're working on Stax Powers working on the third edition. The person how the second edition happened is it was at an ANA show, and Dave Bowers brings over Bob Leonard and says, you got to meet Bob Leonard. He can help you do the second edition. And Bob Leonard was instrumental in doing a lot of the work, research, and getting the second edition done. And I met Bob at the Pittsburgh ANA, and he's agreed to also spearhead doing the third edition, which Stax Bowers will publish sometime probably next year. And how that got started is I collected California fractional gold mostly during my time in the 60s and 70s going to San Francisco. And in San Francisco, I wouldn't only go to coin dealers, I'd go to bookstores, I'd go to antique stores, I'd go to pawn stores, and I'd have these, especially the pawn dealers, for some reason in San Francisco in those days would get coins, but they'd get California fractional coins. So in a period of time, and I was buying them for $10, $15, $18 a piece in the 70s and the 80s. And so I was very interested in the California fractional gold. And I thought there should be a book on it. And then Paul Copenhaver sold me his collection of California fractional gold, and then he also told me he's going to get Kenny Lee's collection of fractional gold. So I said, let's do some. So he gave it to me. I got it on consignment. At the time, I had Pacific Coast Auction Galleries in 1980, 82, and we were going to do an auction on Kenny Lee's collection of California fractional gold. During that time, Walter Breen would come down to the store. I had a little office in the back that Walter would work at cataloging coins. So I hired Walter to catalog the Kenny Lee collection. And then all of a sudden the heirs didn't want to sell the collection, and one thing and another. To make a long story short, I won't go into the whole story, but I ended up buying the collection and selling the collection intact. And we said, well, what are we going to do with this manuscript that Walter's worked, for a long time on this? Let's do a book. Well, it was actually Walter's idea to do a book. Well, it was both of our idea. So we did the California Fractional Gold Book at the time. I think it was 82 or 83. And so it was originally started out was going to be an auction catalog and made it into the reference book.
Great. That's actually a great story. I love hearing that. I love hearing that. Now, this last summer, you received a pretty significant award, the PNG Award. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Excuse me. Yes, it was very nice of the PNG to agree to present it. They presented to me at the ANA at the Stax Bowers table. I couldn't make how it happened is I sent an email to Tina at the PNG saying I'm going to be at the ANA this summer, and this was the beginning of the year, and I've been a member 50 years. Will I get a plaque? She wrote me back and told me that they don't do presentations or banquets at the ANA anymore. They do it to Central States. So I said, well, I can't make it to the Central States. They said, well, we'll mail you your plaque. I said, after being the president, the vice president, the treasurer, the secretary, and being on the board for 17 years and being a supporter of the organization, I think that I would like to get it actually handed to me by the executive director. So she said, let me find out. So then I had talked to her, and she had contacted John Fuggenbaum, the new executive director of the PNG, and he agreed. He said it'd be his pleasure to present it to me at the ANE convention in Pittsburgh, along with Kevin Lipton, the other person who presented to me, who's an old, longtime friend, coin dealer friend that I've known since he was 16. Now, of course, he's very successful and much older like I am. We all get older. But it was exciting to get the plaque after. I mean, I still believe the PNG is a very important organization and will continue to be. And with John spearheading, not that Bob didn't do a good job, but John took over the Coin Dealer newsletter and he just brought it to another level, and he'll do the same thing, in my opinion, with the PNG. And it was just exciting to get it and have it. And Stax Bowers was very cooperative, and I received it at the table and I put it on display there, and they made the little signs for me. So it was great. Yeah, it was very exciting to get it after being a member and being involved in the PNG. And how I got into the PNG is another interesting story, because I talked to Harry Jones at the Pittsburgh ANA. Harry Jones, I noticed, was also got his 50-year plaque. So at the ANA, I talked to him, and he says, yeah, they just mailed it to him. And he says, in 1973, when we joined, it was very difficult to get in. I said, I remember. I says, I remember, I think I got in, I mean, because of my credentials and always, being an upright person, but also my sponsors were Bob Johnson in San Francisco and Abe Kossoff, so that probably helped somewhat too. But it was good to see Harry Jones. I haven't seen him in a while. He told me he was 88. I couldn't believe he was 88. I told him that I hope I look like he does when I'm 88. But he was doing good. But it was an exciting event for me, and I appreciate them doing it there.
I'm really glad for that. And I'm glad that they didn't just mail it to you, because your experience was very different than if you had just opened your front door and there was an award resting on your doorstep. So I'm really glad that you got to experience the full experience.
Yeah, so am I. Thank you very much, Greg.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I had mentioned just, obviously we've mentioned quite a bit throughout your career and your history. And I just wanted to ask just one more question that just came to mind, which was, do you have favorite coins that you've handled throughout the course of your career? Any specific coins that come to mind that were just wow coins for you? I mean, you got to handle something historic and important, or a wow coin, just something that you always, coveted or wanted or liked, or just simply enjoyed when it came across your desk? Are there any coins that come to mind that you've handled over the years that you find memorable?
Well, yes. My favorite coinage is coins struck at the San Francisco Mint. I just had a love for San Francisco Mint coins all my career. And back in the 80s, I wanted to own an 1894 S dime. So the coin dealer I was dealing with in Oakland, Gary Young, who was Leo Young's son, had his father, Leo Young's 1894 S dime. I tried to buy it from him and I couldn't buy it from him. And it ended up in an auction, one of the apostrophe auctions in the 80s. And I bought that 1894 S dime, because it had such a fantastic history, and especially owing the one to Leo Young, because I knew Leo very well and we did a lot of business. And I owned it. I owned it for 2 or 3 years and couldn't afford to keep it. And then I sold it, but that was one of the coins. And then recently, I sold a 1913 nickel, which I always wanted to handle for a customer. And I didn't buy it and sell it. I just was the intermediate fee, but I got to handle it. So I've handled a lot of rare coins. I've handled several $1794 on circulated condition and just various coins over the years. But I think my favorite coin was the 94 S dime.
That's wonderful. I like hearing that. That's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. Well, those are the questions that I had for you. Is there anything that I missed? Is there anything we didn't cover from your history? I want to make sure that we cover anything that you want to share. Is there anything that we didn't cover today that people would like to hear about?
I think we covered pretty much everything that we talked about, and we covered every aspect of my career. There's a lot of little, more stories that are interesting, but I think that the basis and the most important things we've covered. I mean, I like I said, I had a lot of interesting experiences with a lot of the old time dealers, and we've shared those together, and I think that's really pretty much about it.
Good. Well, I'm glad. And for those watching, as Ron and I continue to talk and see one another at coin shows, if more stories come up, we can definitely do a part two anytime. That's very easy to do, especially now that my laptop is working again. We can definitely do a part two anytime. But if people are interested in seeing more of the interviews and the series of interviews that I'm doing, you can search my name. And of course, there's an interview page on the Newman Numismatic portal. So you can find out more about the interviews and learn more about other people from the coin hobby there. And if you have ideas about other people you'd like me to interview, feel free to email me anytime, minterrors@gmail.com. I'd be happy to consider that. And Ron, thank you so much for your time today. It's been amazing talking to you. I really appreciate it.
It's been an amazing time for me, and going through some of my history, it brings back great memories, and I'm glad to share them and hope people enjoy them. And it's easy to get a hold of me if somebody has some questions of me. Just look up Gillio and you'll find me. And I'll be glad to talk to him. But it was fun doing this, and thanks very much.
Thank you.